Did I ever tell you the definition of insanity? Insanity is playing the same game over and over again, while expecting a different result. How many times are we going to liberate the same bell towers, clear the same outpost, and defeat unique villains that always manage to somehow carry the entire game? Once? Twice? Maybe 5 times? How long can we stand playing the same game over and over again before we become clinically insane? Far Cry 3 is well known as one of the best first-person shooter story games released during the golden age of gaming. And that's saying a lot, because during this time we had pure kino like BioShock, Fallout New Vegas, and so much more. And despite Far Cry 3 being advertised as, quote, like Skyrim with guns, for whatever moronic marketing reason, it wasn't that at all. It was a beautifully told story with a set of unique and interesting characters that managed to leave a mark on us Zoomers who were lucky enough to convince our mommies to buy it for us. By all measures, Far Cry 3 was an amazing game, and as much as it pains me to say it, Ubisoft really outdone themselves. But unfortunately, as time has gone on, every subsequent Far Cry game has never lived up to their magnum opus that was Far Cry 3. Now, I've played every Far Cry game but 6 because I'm not gonna lie, that looked like dog shit. But this question has been fuming inside me for so long. Why is it that there hasn't been a Far Cry game that's been better than Far Cry 3 after 12 years and 5 subsequent games? The go-to answer that I typically hear is that there is one Far Cry sequel that surpasses 3, the game that came out right after it, Far Cry 4. But here's the thing. I've played Far Cry 4, and I've even beat it a couple times. To say it's better than Far Cry 3 is just wrong on so many levels. But the question is, what makes it lesser? Could it be the lack of innovation? Or maybe the antagonist wasn't likable? Or is it the gameplay that is lacking? When gamers like myself want to compare 2 games against each other, this age-old question often pops up. Which is a more important staple of a good game? Gameplay or story? Ideally, most people would want both to be satisfactory, but if you had to choose one or the other, which would it be? Let's say we compare a narrative-driven story game like Life is Strange against a gameplay-focused game like Dishonored. Which is the better game overall? Would it be Dishonored with its story, yet smooth, butter-like orgasmic combat that has you itching for another mission after each and every stage clear like a fent addict on the verge of withdrawal? Or Life is Strange, which the gameplay consists of clicking things over and over again, yet despite this, it still makes you sweat bullets in suspense while intriguing you in the same way that a first-rate mystery novel might? The answer is obviously Dishonored, because Life is Strange has way too many female characters in it. Just kidding. In reality, who's to say which is the better game? Because comparing a gameplay-focused game against a narrative-driven game is like comparing Anthrax to Indian street food. They'll both get you sick for sure, but everyone has their own preferences to which one they'd rather consume. For me, I personally prefer the former. I'm talking about gameplay, that is, not the Anthrax. Although that Indian food is looking a little crazy, I'm not gonna lie. Anyway, if I had to choose between a game with a dogshit story but amazing gameplay, versus a game with dookie trash gameplay but an extraordinary life-changing narrative, I would honestly pick the game with the more funner gameplay every single time without fail. Which is exactly why I was so absolutely flabbergasted after completing Far Cry 3 and 4. I just don't understand it. I might be becoming schizophrenic, or worse, old. How is it possible that I like Far Cry 3 more than 4? Despite Far Cry 4 having objectively better gameplay. Far Cry 4 has more vehicles, better perks, expanded weapon customization, better graphics, a stunningly beautiful world that mogs Far Cry 3 to death, the addition of the final boss of Outpost known as Fortresses, a battle arena, and even rideable elephants. But despite these clear improvements, there was something seriously missing from Far Cry 4, which is one word: personality. The one and only thing that makes Far Cry 4 inferior to Far Cry 3 is the lack of personality coming from one character, the main character. Meet Ajay, Ghale, one of the, if not the most, boring protagonist ever written in video game history. He makes silent protags like Corvo from Dishonored and Jack from BioShock seem like they have personalities that are exceptionally captivating. To say Ajay is boring is an understatement. This guy's like a human personification of a plant. Not one of those cool plants either. I'm talking about those generic plastic houseplants that lazy middle-aged white women love to buy. This guy is so annoyingly apathetic about virtually everything. And I know what you might be thinking. Most FPS protagonists aren't written well, so who cares if Ajay is boring? Well, here's the thing. I wouldn't give a flying fuck about the lack of character writing that went into Ajay if Jason from Far Cry 3 wasn't a thing. Jason, in contrast to Ajay, has one of the most interesting character arcs I've ever seen in a video game to date, and especially an FPS game. But to understand why, first you have to know who Jason Brody is. Jason starts as your typical frat boy, sheltered SoCal douchebag who has little to no redeeming qualities. And despite being 27 years old, his only form of employment is doing odd jobs here and there and leeching off his family. After parachuting onto an unknown island, Jason and his friends are kidnapped for ransom by one of the most lovable villains in existence, Nacho from Better Call Saul. I mean Voss. Anyway, Jason nearly escapes with his Chad army brother Grant, but his brother is unexpectedly killed by Voss. Then Jason escapes, and he gets saved by the Rakyat tribe that help him on his quest to rescue his friends. Under their guidance, Jason becomes a certified badass and goes on rescue missions to save his homies, but because of the excess murder he has to commit to liberate outposts and go on rescue missions, he quickly sheds the character of the spoiled rich kid, and morphs into a murderous sociopathic monster who genuinely enjoys killing people. This is some heavy stuff, man. His character changes so drastically during the course of the game. You can see this when he goes from nearly shitting himself after putting an enemy down in self-defense, to not even hesitating when it comes to torturing his own brother. He turns into such a monster that, during the final boss battle, not only does he destroy the final boss of the game in a blind rage, but also the whole crew of armored soldiers that made the fatal mistake of being in his general vicinity. Jason is an insanely interesting character, who got unfairly shadowed by Voss's equally amazing character writing. What the Far Cry games are missing nowadays aren't just interesting villains, even though that's become an integral part of the Far Cry series. That's not the only thing that makes Far Cry memorable. It's also the interesting, well-written protagonists that make the game truly shine. This is the main area that subsequent Far Cry games have failed in repeatedly. The character arc of Jason Brody and the character arc of Ajay Ghale are so far apart in terms of complexity, it's not even funny. Far Cry 4 is clearly a regression from Far Cry 3 in terms of character writing, and to understand why, all you have to do is compare Jason and Ajay. Every protagonist has some sort of goal they want to achieve. For Jason in Far Cry 3, the goal was to save his friends and get them off the island. Now on the other hand, Ajay's goal, despite being noble, isn't anything that urgent. He has no real need to save anybody. He's just supposed to go home to his country Karat and spread his mother's ashes in some temple that he has no idea where it's at. And while he's in Karat, he gets kidnapped by his rich stepdad. Then he's saved by some rebels. And then he's like, yeah, I'm here to fulfill my mother's dying wish and spread her ashes, but if these freedom fighters need me to slaughter some soldiers and liberate a couple outposts here and there, I mean, I might as well. When in Rome, right? And he does all of this with no kind of experience. So not only is he boring, but he's also a boring Mary Sue character. His story makes absolutely no sense. With Jason, there's this realism that we seldom see explored in games today. That being the psychological effect of taking another person's life. Often video game characters are mass murderers because murder is fun, okay? Enough said. But you rarely see how much this might affect the protagonist psychologically. They usually just go along with their day and sleep soundly at night after killing the population of a small-sized town after a mission. But you see Jason, on the other hand, visibly upset at the prospect of killing someone.
Who is that? What the fuck?
Holy shit. Oh god, I can't do this, Grant.
The amount of realism coming from this character is astonishing. It's almost like he's never killed a person before, and after doing it, he feels guilty and scared. Crazy. Now let's compare this to Ajay's first kill, where I shit you not, out of nowhere, Ajay just snatches up a gun out of the glove box of a car and starts blasting people like he's a seasoned veteran with several Medal of Honors on his sash. He just killed a bunch of people he knows nothing about out of nowhere, and his only reaction to that is whoa. Don't try to defend this by saying some stupid shit like, well, Ajay has military experience, because this is literal headcanon. Nowhere in the official lore does it say that Ajay has any kind of military experience. He even says that he's not a soldier to Amita when they first meet. There is one retcon where someone emailed Ubisoft years after the game was released, and they responded saying that he was in the Air Force, or whatever. But retcons are a clear sign of horrendous writing. According to the lore that's in the game, he was just some random dude who was caught up in the wrong crowd growing up. Then after the death of his mother, he decided to go back to his home country and murder a bunch of people for some crazy terrorists, because why the hell not? This is one of the main reasons why I think that Ajay is a terribly written and boring character. He's like a plastic bag, ready to fly whichever way the wind blows. Ajay's development, if you can call it that, is so drastically different from Jason's to a point that it makes me think that the writers may have suffered from a lobotomy right before writing Far Cry 4. Now, you can make the argument that Ajay is written this way so the player can immerse themselves in Ajay in the same way that one would in an RPG. But Ajay is not a silent protagonist like we see in other games, like Far Cry 5 for example with the Warden. Ajay speaks every now and again, he just severely lacks personality and development. On top of that, I just don't believe the silent protagonists work in the Far Cry series, at least when it comes to making Far Cry games the best that they can be. I believe the recipe to creating a good Far Cry game is to have an interesting, well-written protagonist that complements the interesting, well-written villain. Like with the GOATs, Jason and Voss. Jason makes Voss a better character, and Voss makes Jason a better character. They complement each other like wine and cheese. This is exactly what the true Far Cry experience should be all about. But we keep seeing more boring protags that don't go through any kind of character development. Far Cry 4 is the definition of wasted potential. Again, gameplay-wise, Far Cry 4 is more fun than Far Cry 3 hands down. And if Ubisoft played more on the rediscovering roots trope and sprinkled a little character development here and there, there'd be no doubt in my mind that Far Cry 4 would have surpassed Far Cry 3. But because they failed to do this, Far Cry 4 will forever remain as forgettable, with its only hint of remembrance being the saving grace that is Pagan Mint. And I still don't know how to end these videos, so yeah, join the Discord if you want to join the Discord, and I'm out of here.